right, we're on Parshas BeHar. And if you want to follow, it's on 696.
Yeah.
As always, you don't have to. And it begins by saying, Vaydaber Shem Moshe Lemor BeHar Sinai Lemor. So the introduction is a little different. It says, Hashem says to Moshe at Mount Sinai, say the following. Daber b'nei Yisrael, tell the Jewish people what I'm about to tell you. Usually it just says, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Right? Here it adds BeHar Sinai, meaning there's some reason that the Torah wants us to know that this was said on Mount Sinai. Right? We know that Torah was given to us on Mount Sinai. So what is it? Right? And therefore we would think that if it says that Hashem says to Moshe, it's in Har Sinai. Right? It doesn't say like Hashem says to Moshe in Hebrew. Right? We know it's Hebrew. We know it's on Mount Sinai. So why are they telling us Mount Sinai here? They don't tell us Mount Sinai everywhere else. So there has to be something that's important about this, what he's about to say, that we need to know it was said at Mount Sinai. That's the first part. Now, what is it that he's talking about that we need to know? So he says, V'amarta alehem, and he says to them, Ki savu ela aretz, when you go to the land, asher ani nosin lechem, that I'm going to give you, v'shavta aretz, shavas lashem, right? And you're going to go to this land, the land of Israel, and you're going to inhabit this land. You're going to start making it into a habitable place. What happens? You should go work in your fields for 6 years. You should plant in your vineyards for 6 years. And you should gather together anything that grows. You go out and you have a wheat field, plant the wheat. After you're done planting the wheat, right, gather the wheat. It's yours. Right? Okay, very nice. Right, then it says, Uvashana Hashvis, but the 7th year, Shabbos Shabbaton Yela Aretz. It should be a day of Shabbos, a year of Shabbos for the land. Shabbos La Hashem, Sadecha Lo Tizra. It's a Shabbos for God. Your field you shall not plant. Karmecha Lo Tizmor. You should not take care of your vineyards. Es Sofiecha Katsircha Velo Toxer. Anything that grows, you shouldn't gather it, and so forth and so on. So here God is telling the Jewish people, right, that for 6 years in the land, the first 6 years you go into the land, go out there, it's yours. You want to plant wheat, plant it. Take care of it, cut it down, sell it, eat it, it's yours. 6 years. 7th year, stop. You can't do it.
Sorry to interrupt you. Why? Why is that?
Well, that's what we're going to discuss. So the 7th year, you're not allowed. You have to let the land rest. Okay, so now before we go on to the rest of it, we have to look at Rashi, because Rashi asks us one of the most famous questions that Rashi asks in the Torah, and it's used by people all the time. And it says, Ma inyan shmita eitzel har Sinai. And he's going on the same question we asked. What, for God's sake, does the laws of the sabbatical year, the 7th year, that you can't plant your fields, right? What does that have to do with Mount Sinai? But why does it have to tell you here? God tells Moshe on Mount Sinai. Okay, so he tells Moshe on Mount Sinai, right? What does he tell him? He tells him about right at the beginning. He tells him all about the 6 years you can plant your field, the 7th year you have to let it rest. What is the law of letting your field rest the 7th year have to do with Mount Sinai? Right? That's Rashi's saying. It's like they say, what's that got to do with the cost of eggs in China? Right? What's one got to do with the other? Right? It's very nice that God gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai, but why do you have to tell us you gave it on Mount Sinai and then tell us about 6 years and 1 year? Like, what's one got to do with the other? Right? So Rashi says, the other column mitzvahs number was Sinai. Weren't all of the mitzvahs said at Sinai? You have to just tell us this one was said at Sinai. Elama shmita number koloseha b'partoseha b'dutokea misinai. And his answer is, just like the laws of the 7th year, the sabbatical year, the general rules and the specific rules and the details were all said at Mount Sinai. Avkulan namru koloseham b'dukoseim misinai. Then everything, for all of the mitzvahs, were also said in general and in specific and in detail on Mount Sinai. That's why it's telling you. Why? Because it's saying the following. The laws of Shemitah are mundane laws. Right? Basically, going out, planting in your field, right? Watering your field, gathering in the crops, selling the crops, eating the crops, Right? That's pretty mundane. There's no praying to God, keeping Shabbos here. Then comes along the 7th year, and you can't do anything. Right? That's the law, he says. So Rashi is saying that what it's telling us is that you might tell me, I don't need to know about this from Sinai. Right? These are the laws of like civil laws. These are not laws of killing somebody, laws of offering sacrifices, holy laws. These are laws of mundane things. So Rashi is saying the Torah is telling us that not only are the spiritual laws come from God, but all of them come from God. I tell you, for instance, the laws of life and death come from God. So do I need to know that? Can I say that God says, don't murder? Well, I don't need God to tell me not to murder. I'm not going to murder. You know why? Because if I don't murder, then I'm sending a message. I don't want anyone to murder me. Right? I'm not going to rape because I don't want anyone to rape me. I'm not going to steal. I don't want anyone to steal from me. That's logical. I don't need God to tell me. Right? So here Rashi is telling us that these laws, right? It says these laws were set on Mount Sinai to tell you that there's no such thing as a law that's mundane, does not come from Sinai. Because, for instance, as we said before, if I tell you I'm not going to murder because I don't want anyone to murder me, and that's logical. So what's the definition of murder? How about, can I go to war? Can I defend myself? Is that murder? If somebody comes to kill me and I kill him, did I murder him? Am I allowed to do that? But so it's self-defense. Well, how do you know? How do you know that you're allowed to kill someone to take care of yourself? Who says that it's more important for you to be alive than him? How do we know that? How do we know when someone's in the hospital and there's a machine keeping them alive that they're alive? Maybe they're dead and it's just the machine doing it, so we can turn off the machine. Maybe we can't turn off the machine. Is a fetus, a person does an abortion, is he murdering a human? Or is he he's just cutting off a part of a woman's body? What are you doing? How do you know the answer? Right? It's telling you that just like we think that many laws are mundane and that we just logically figure them out, the fact is we don't. We might have some concept of it, but the real answers, what is life? What is death? What is ownership? What is yours? What is mine? All of these things we get from God. They don't come. But you imagine, I spoke about this once before, but I find the most amazing thing is the law of marriage. Where you can have, you have a man and you have a woman. Let's say the woman is a millionaire and the man is poor, right? So they're two separate people. If they're not married, the woman dies. Does this man have any right to her money? No. He's not related. He's nobody to her. Does he mourn for her? Right? Does he actually sit Shiva? No. He doesn't sit Shiva. Does he have to follow the laws of a mourner? Say Kaddish, not get a haircut, not buy things? No. He's got no relationship to her. But what if he loves her? Doesn't matter. Not related to her. Suddenly you do this ritual, right? You give her a ring, you have a big party, spend lots of money, right? And what happens? Now she dies, he gets her money. Now she dies, he has to mourn for her. I said Shiva, right? Right? How about let's reverse it? Let's say he dies, right? But if she doesn't marry him, right? And then she decides she wants to marry a Kohen, she can marry a Kohen. What if she marries this guy and then they get divorced? Now she can't marry a Kohen. But all she did was marry this guy, and then she got divorced. She's not married to him anymore, but it changed her, right? How would we know these things, right? It's very logical that the Torah is telling us this. The Torah changes the status of people. Right? You can get married, and by virtue of the fact that you get married, you change. One of the most amazing ones is that if you have a Kohen eats special food that is, the Torah requires that people give them as payment. It's a way of paying that. A Kohen works in the temple. How does he get paid? God doesn't give him a paycheck every 2 weeks. So who pays him? So the people pay him. So that everybody has a certain amount of, let's say, their field has to go to the Kohen. That's called Truma. Right? So that's very nice. The Kohen gets it, but what about his family? His wife? Maybe her father's not a Kohen. Maybe she's not from a Kohen's family. She might come from a Yisrael family or from Dan, different tribe, right? Well, how do we know? So then he can't give the truma to his wife. How's he supposed to vote his family? So the Torah says, no, you can give truma, a Kohen can give truma to his family, right? So now the Kohen has a daughter. So he can give his daughter truma, she can eat it. The day his daughter gets married, she can't eat it anymore, unless she marries a Kohen. Because she becomes whatever the husband is. If the husband's not a Kohen, she's not a Kohen anymore. She can't eat the truma. The day before she can, the day after she can. The day before it's a mitzvah, the day after she'll be punished for it. Right?
Rabbi, sorry. She goes to visit her parents. She has a meal in their house.
Yeah. Can't eat the truma though. She can eat regular food. But she can't eat the truma. Truma is special food only for a Kohen. A Kohen can eat food that's not truma, and a Kohen can have food that's not truma. But only a Kohen can eat truma. Right? So if I'm a Kohen, I can have a house with 90% of my food is regular food, 10% is truma. Right? So if my family want it, they eat from the truma. Everybody else eats the regular food. Right? I can do that. Right? But I can't do that. But vice versa, I can't do it. I can't say, if you come to my house, I can't give you truma because you're not a Kohen. So I can't. But if Manny was a Kohen and you marry Manny, then you can come to my house and I can give you truma. Right? So you say, this is
a Kohen's wife. You always care for two people at the same time.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Well, if you're going to have company, you don't serve truma. That's all. Right? Serve a different thing. Because, well, basically, what we see from this, right, that really makes some type of a difference is that marriage changes the status of the person. They become a different person, right? So we get that from Mount Sinai, and you say, right? So if marriage is like that, and death is like that, and birth is like that, right? So the Torah is telling you here, even the laws of farming are like that. Even you think are mundane civil laws that have nothing to do with God, the only way you can know how to do this is from God. The fact that we say our society very clearly says you can't murder people, like the society here in Canada. Did they need the Torah to say you can't murder someone? I would think not. The answer is yes. We think that it comes from Canadian society, but Canadian society got it from us, right? That's how we know it. Because there are societies in the world that you can murder, or you can murder for different reasons, right? They have the Somalis, Somali, I think it was where Margaret Mead studied, right, back in the 60s. Samoa, right. So she studied in the 60s. She said that they had a custom that they would kill their parents. Right? Why? Because they said that when you die, they were taught when you die, whatever mental capability you have at the moment of death is what you have forever. So if you are a 60-year-old adult and your mind is at the top of your life, right? The top, right? It's running at the best. You've got all the knowledge. It's mature. It's working great. Right? Then if you love your parents, you'll kill them right then, so that forever they'll have that mind in the world to come. But if you don't really love your parents, you'll let them live until they're in their 90s and they become feeble, and then they die, and that's how their mind is going to be. That was what they believed. So therefore they would kill their parents. Now for us, that's the most horrible thing you could do. What kind of person would kill their parents? They'd say, right? And they'd come to us and say, God, you have a couple, they get together, they're in love, they want to get married, they have a child. And what do? You cut off a part of his body. What's wrong with you people? How do you do that to a baby? Right? We call that a bris. They call it mutilation. We say that they're doing patricide, killing their father, and they say they're doing a mitzvah. So who's right? So we have an answer. Our answer is the Torah says we're right. God told us this is how you do it. This is the definition of life and death. There is no such thing as when you die, your mental capability is whatever it was the moment you died. Right? It's not true, but they believe it. Right? So you need the Torah to tell you this. So that's why it's saying it like this. It's telling you at Mount Sinai to tell you this story. Right? And then it goes on and it tells you about another one. Another one at the end of this page is, you shall count for yourself 7 cycles of sabbatical years. So now you've got 6 years. The 7th year is the sabbatical year, called the Shemitah year. Then you've got 7 sevens. So you have 6 years and the 7th. Then you have the next one, the 6 years and the 7th. I'm on verse 8 on that same page. Then you have 6 years, then year 7. Do that 7 times. Right? You've done 49 years. The next year, year 50, is just like the 7th year. Same rule. That's called the Jubilee year, right, in English. In Hebrew, it's Yovel, right? I think it's a neighborhood in South Africa, right? So it's 49 years, and the next one is the same. So it tells you there's also such a law, and that law has even more. It says you blow the shofar on that day, the first day of the year, and then you have to free all your slaves, and anybody who owes you money doesn't owe you money anymore, right? It's free, it's waived. All kinds of rules happen in the 50th year. We don't happen to know when that 50th year is anymore. We've lost track. We know when the 7th year is. We keep that still. And it's only in Israel, by the way. These laws are only applying in the land of Israel. So that's what it says. So we have the laws of Shemitah, but we don't have the 50th year. We don't know when it is.
How we can not know this? If you know,
we've lost track. Because we lost track of when the 7th is.
We just inserted the 7th year, whoever we want. Whichever we wanted.
Yeah, but this would be the 8th year, right? 7 sevens, and the next year is the 50th year.
This year is particularly 7th.
No, we don't. They don't know which one is which 7. We don't know if this is the first of the 7, the second of the 7, the 7th of the 7. We don't know.
So
we just know that it's 7, but we don't know how many. So we've lost track. It's a fact. It talks about it in the writings. That we don't know. But the 7th year we do know, and we keep that. So imagine, there's a number of important things with this. I mean, most of the commentaries talk about this first page. That's most of the whole book, this whole chapter is on this first page. First thing is, this is known as one of the basic proofs for Judaism. You imagine this following. It's what they call the first fool theory. This is brought forth by a number of philosophers, and they say the following. They say, it says in the Torah, right, that there's a mitzvah that you have to teach your children about the going out of Egypt. We call that Passover night, Seder night. We teach our children about the going out of Egypt and the giving of the Torah, the slavery, the freedom, and the giving of the Torah. That's what we have to do on Passover night, right? That's the real, forget all the other pieces. The purpose of Passover night is to hand over the tradition to the next generation. So that's what we're doing, right? So here's what happens, is that let's say we really came out of Egypt, us, right? This is back that year. We came out of Egypt. Along comes the first year. Now we've been out for a year. It's Passover night. So we have to tell our children about how we came out of Egypt. Now chances are our children also came out of Egypt. And unless they're little babies. It's only been a year, right? So we're telling people who went out of Egypt how we went out of Egypt. So of course they're going to believe us because they were there, right? So then our grandchildren come along. So some of our grandchildren will have been there. But for sure, our grandchildren can say, my parents and my grandparents were there. They saw it themselves, right? So it's pretty easy for them to believe it, because they've got the majority of the Jewish world was there. They weren't, because they're too young, but everybody else was. And go on, the next generation, they can also say, my grandparents were there, right? And they know their grandparents, right? The next generation after that, now you're 5 generations away. You're somewhere in the area of 150 years later. There's a first generation that doesn't have first-hand knowledge of the going out of Egypt, the first one, right? So that's if, of course, the story's true. Let's say the story's not true. It's not true. Moshe invented the Torah, right? In order for whatever ulterior motive people say, God didn't give us the Torah, whatever reason people say. So now along comes this mitzvah in the Torah that I got to tell my children how we went out of Egypt, how there was 10 plagues, how God killed the firstborn, how God split the sea, how God gave us the Torah, and none of it happened. But I got to tell it to my children. They're not going to believe me. They were there. They know it didn't happen, right? So what do? I have to have a conspiracy. Every Jew, and every Jew who's alive then, adults, children, grandchildren who are all alive then, have to all conspire and agree that they are going to teach everyone that the Torah actually happened, right? And none of them are going to disagree. They're all going to do this, okay? Which is pretty good, get Jews to all agree on one thing, right? But they do. And not only one, but 3 generations, because there are 3 generations of people there, okay? They all had to agree, all right? And then along comes the Torah, and it says, on the 6 years that you're going to go into the land, right? Remember, the Jews, in 40 days, they think they're going into Israel. They didn't know it'd be 40 years at this point. They thought it was 40 days. So it says, when you go to the land of Israel, for the first 6 years you can work the land, right? You're farmers. Work the land. I'm giving it to you as a gift. I'm giving you free land, God says. Go ahead and work the land. The 7th year you can't, right? You can't. So not only that, but after you count 7 sevens, so on the 49th year you can't, right? Because it's the 49th year. It's the 7th of the 7th. And the 50th year you can't. So now you got 2 years in a row that you can't plant or reap anything, right? You can't for 2 years in a row. So what's going to happen to a farmer if he can't do anything for 2 years? Nothing. He's going to starve to death, right? So now we'll go back to the story. You go back to the story. Here I am. I went out of Egypt. We all came out of Egypt. All of our children came out of Egypt, and all our grandchildren came out of Egypt. And we all conspired to tell our children and grandchildren. We all got together. From now on, we're going to tell the future Jews that it's a true story, including that they can't farm in the 7th year, and they can't farm in the 50th year, which means 2 years in a row they can't farm, right? Do you know Jewish parents? Are they going to do that to their kids? Are they not going to tell their kids the truth? Not one person going to tell their kids, listen, we got to pretend this happened, but look, we were there, right? We know it didn't happen. It's all made up. For whatever reason, we want to tell people to believe it, but it's not true. So let's do this. Let's tell everybody it's true. All right, but I love you. You're going into the land of Israel. You're going to be a farmer. Don't tell anyone, but plant on the 7th year. Go ahead. Nothing's going to happen. There is no God. We just made it up. Go ahead and do it. Everybody else won't do it, but I'm telling you, it's not, it's not true. Go ahead and do it. And just very subtly tell your kids, but don't tell anybody else, because we swore an allegiance that we wouldn't tell. It's a conspiracy, right? Like, who wouldn't do that? Everybody would do it. Everybody would tell their kids, you want your kids to starve to death? Of course not. But nobody did it. I mean, there's nothing like that. So this is one of the logical, using logic, proofs for the Torah, which is one of the reasons why it tells us that the sabbatical year in the 50th year was said on Mount Sinai. Right? It was said on the mountain by God to Moshe as sort of a fail-safe, as a catch-22 sort of thing, so that people would not be able to logically and intellectually, honestly say that this has to be the Torah is false, because this is a way that we're proving it every year, that we tell people that you have to wait on the 7th year and you can't plant on that year, and we love our kids and we tell this to our kids. It's got to be true. It can't be we're making this up, so our kids should starve to death. Right? So that's one of the ideas as to why it's said on Mount Sinai, why it's said here, and why it's said, and why these laws are here, and it gives us this idea. So the 49th year and the 50th. And now I told you in the 50th year, the Jubilee year, there's a shofar blown, and then it says all the slaves have to go free. So why? It says that you have the shofars blown on Rosh Hashanah, and on Yom Kippur the shofar is blown for this, specifically, for the 50th year. So what is the purpose of blowing the shofar? So the commentaries say it was to wake people up to what's going on. So I have to ask you, if the 50th year is coming, right? The 49th year you're going through hell. You can't bring in any wheat. If you have an apple orchard and the apples grow by themselves, you can't take them. You got to let the poor people have them. Well, you're going to be plenty poor yourself, right? Come the 50th year, you got to do the same thing again, right? So you have it again. And so the people very well may not follow it. So they blow the shofar beforehand in order to wake people up and say, the shofar is blown on Rosh Hashanah. God accounts, he takes an accounting from you that you do what you're supposed to do, right? So the shofar sort of reminds them, right? Now, but there's another very interesting reason for this, why they blow the shofar, and that has to do on the 50th year, because you have to free your slaves. Now, if you've ever studied the laws of slavery in Judaism, it's not what anybody thinks. It says if you have one pillow, the slave gets the pillow. If you have only enough food for one person, you have to give the food to the slave. You have to if you hit your slave or injure your slave, you have to pay him and let him go free. You're not allowed to beat a slave. You're not allowed to humiliate a slave. You're not allowed to hurt a slave. You're not allowed to overwork a slave. You're supposed to give respect to a slave. They are a slave because they got themselves in trouble, and a way of getting out of trouble is to sell yourself into slavery, get the money you need, and then get your freedom. So now they're going to go free. The 50th year is coming. They're going to go free. No more debts. Right? Whatever debts they had that they had to sell themselves, they don't have it anymore. It's the 50th year. Right? Now let's look at this from the side of the slave owner. I own 10 slaves, and I've got a business, right? And the slaves work my business for free. So imagine if you had a business and you didn't have to pay your staff, how good your business would be. Amazing. I could open a store, right? I have to pay for the goods, right? I have to have customers, but I could open up like chains of stores because I don't have to pay the staff. They'll come in the morning, they'll turn the lights on, they'll sell my stuff for me, they'll take an accounting, they'll lock up at night, and I don't pay them a penny. Why? They're my slaves, right? They have to. So now I'm running my business with 50 slaves, right? I have 200 employees, but 25% of my employees I don't have to pay. I'm pretty happy, right? Along comes the 50th year, I got to free them. I'm going to feel pretty bad, and my business is going to fail now. Because I made a business predicated on the fact that I only have to pay 75% of the expenses, the 25% are slaves. Now I've got to let the slaves go. I got to have 100% paid employees. I'm up the creek. My project margin just went down like that. Maybe I'm going to be out of business. I'm not going to give up my slaves so fast. Right? I'm not going to do it. So it says that you blow the shofar, so that it's a way that everybody. What happens when you make a noise? Everybody looks at where the noise comes from. So the shofar blows. Everybody looks at each other, at where the shofar was. They're all looking towards it, and they come to realize that there's power in numbers. That misery loves company. So if I have to give up my slaves, you know what makes me feel better? That my competition has to give up his slaves too. You got to give up your slaves too. Not just me. And I'm going to have peer pressure because I'm not the only guy. Everybody knows I got to give up my slaves, and everybody's looking at me. And that's why the shofar's blown, so that it reminds me that don't fall apart. You know, Macy's might have to give up their slaves, but Gimbel's has to also, right? It's not just the Bay that has to give up its slaves, right? Also, Eaton's had to give its slaves up. Didn't help them any, I guess. But if they were still in business, or Simpsons, if they were still in business, right? They'd say, oh, at least we can compete, because they also have to give up their slaves, so we'll all make less profit. So that's the idea. So the shofar is blown in order to have that peer pressure. Now this is very interesting. It shows us how strong peer pressure is. That the Torah takes into account. In other words, God understands that human beings have peer pressure. That if all of your friends, that we used to say, my mother used to say, "Oh, your friends jump off the roof. You're going to jump off the roof too." Right? I said, "Come on, Mom. All my friends do it." Yeah, they all jump off the roof. Right? But the fact is, yeah, you probably would. He probably would. If all your friends jump out of an airplane with a parachute, I'd jump out of an airplane with a parachute. If nobody would do it, maybe I wouldn't do it. But if everyone does it, I'd say, okay, I can do it. Right? That's what the idea of blowing the shofar at Jubilee year, at the Yovel year is. It's a way of us all looking and saying, you know what, it's not so bad. Everyone's got to give up their slaves. I'm not the only one. And not only that, if I don't give up my slaves, if I break the rule, everyone's going to know. And I'm not going to get away with it, so I may as well follow the rule. So that's why it tells us that there. That's the idea of it. Otherwise, when it says, what is the reason of the Shemitah year, the sabbatical year being spoken about at Har Sinai as we started our talk today, right, there's all kinds of jokes. Right? I had a teacher who used to say, well, the laws of Shemitah, of the sabbatical year, have to do with growing, right? Growing things. So on the mountain, there's dirt. You're growing on the mountain. So God says, on Mount Sinai, even on Mount Sinai, you got to follow the law. Right? But he says it wasn't really true. It's not in the land of Israel. But they used to have all kinds of jokes. Just like, what's the price of eggs in China? People would say the same thing. Someone would come to me and say, Rabbi, I don't know what to do. I think my wine might not be kosher because my mother wore a green dress. And I'll say, what does the sabbatical year have to do with Mount Sinai, right? My Shemitah Salar Sinai. What's what got to do with it? Your mother was green dress and your wine's not kosher. There's no relationship here. And then he goes through this long, convoluted story and explains it, right? But the details don't make sense. We say it all the time. The price of the dollar is going to go down because the price of gas is going to go up because there's a disagreement between Yemen and Saudi Arabia. Right? Well, what does that got to do with me? Right? Why do I pay more? Because you know what will happen? When there's an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, the price will go up again. Makes no difference. It doesn't go down. It goes up. It goes up when they're fighting. It goes up when they're getting along. What's the difference? Mine in Shemitah, it's Lar Sinai, right? That's how it's used a lot. Right? So this is a discussion of slaves, about agricultural years. Now, if we look on 698, 699, verse 14, when you make a sale to your fellow, or make a purchase from the hand of your fellow, do not aggrieve one another. According to the number of years after the Jubilee year shall you buy from your fellow. According to the number of crop years shall he sell to you. According to the greater number of years shall you increase his price, and according to the lesser number you shall decrease it. Each of you shall not aggrieve his fellow, and you shall fear your God. I am Hashem your God. So what did I just say? I said that basically when I have land in Israel, I inherit land. Every one of us do. We're Jews, right? God gave it to our forefathers. Right? Each tribe got land. Each member of the tribe gets land. I got land in Israel, right? But I don't need all my land. Right? I'm a lawyer. What do I need a farm for? So you are a farmer, and you have a certain amount of land, but you're right next door to me. You could make a lot more money if you double your land. So I'm going to sell you some of my land. But in Israel, selling land is not permanent. You can only sell it till the Jubilee year, the 50th year, and then it returns to the original owner. So I'm really renting it to you, right? But it's called a sale. So in Israel, I can sell you land, and I sell it for more money if it's further away from the 50th year, less money if you're closer to the 50th year, right? Because come the 50th year, the land comes back to me. It's mine again, because I'm the original owner. So it says. So now that you have that fact, now let's read what I just said. Because you're making a sale to your fellow, right? Right? Don't aggrieve one another. I mean, don't cheat them. Don't cheat each other. And then it says, according to the number of years after the Jubilee year shall you buy from your fellow. Right? How many years away am I from the last one, or how am I to the next one? That'll tell me how much I should pay for the land. If I've got 2 years till the Jubilee year, I'm going to pay less than if I have 40 years. Right? So you buy your land based on that, because this is a fact. In the 50th year, ownership goes back to the original owner, no matter what you do. Now, then it says, in verse 17, at the end of the paragraph, and you shall not aggrieve your fellow, and you shall fear God, I am Hashem. The first paragraph line said, don't aggrieve each other. Right? Don't cheat one another. And then in the end, it says, don't cheat one another. Right? What is it? It's only 5 verses later. In one verse, it says, you're going to sell land, don't cheat each other. And then it tells you how to buy the land. And then it says, don't cheat each other, because I'm God. Well, so the problem is, why does it tell you twice, don't cheat each other? Right? And then why does it tell you, I am God? What's the purpose of this? Right? So it's telling us an important point, and this point comes up with another mitzvah, the mitzvah of lending money, which is also here. There's a mitzvah in the Torah that if another Jew needs money, it's a mitzvah to lend them money. Right? Not to be stupid, right? The guy's a crook, but if you have the ability to lend money, and a Jew needs money, and you have reason to trust that Jew, even with guarantors, whatever you need, but you'll help him out. It's a Torah mitzvah to help him out, to do it, to actually give a loan to someone, and you're not allowed to charge him interest on the loan. So if you can't afford to do it, not charge interest, then don't give him the loan. But if you want to fulfill the mitzvah, you can't charge him interest. But there's really nothing wrong with charging interest. What's wrong with it? Right? Like, let's say I have a business. In my business, I sell cars. Now, let's say I rent cars. Right? And you are flying to Toronto to do business. You're going to make a business deal. If this business deal goes through, you're going to make $1 million. You fly to Toronto, now you got to get to your meeting. How are you going to get there? So you're going to rent a car. I'll rent you a car. Should I not make a profit on you? Of course I should make a profit. Right? The car costs me $10 a day. I'll charge you $20. So I'm making $10 a day on you. Does anyone think there's something wrong with that? No. So why is it if you need money and I lend you money? It's my business to lend money. It's my business. Just like I rent cars, I'm renting money. I'm renting you my money. Shouldn't I make a profit on it? Is there anything wrong with making a profit on it? So the Torah says there is. Because we're talking about your brother. And see, there's nothing wrong with making a profit. Right? When you're doing business with human beings, you can make a profit on money. A reasonable profit. You can't do usury. You can't charge too much. You can charge a reasonable amount. But the Torah asks you a question. Under normal circumstances, because this question, it used to work better than it does today. Under normal circumstances, if your brother came to you for a loan because he was in trouble, and most people who borrow money rather than objects are in trouble. That's why they're borrowing money. So your brother comes to you and he's $5,000, and you've got $5,000 and you're not using it. right? And he needs it, or he's going to, let's say, lose his house, right? And he'll pay you back. You have no reason to think he won't pay you back. He's always paid you back before. Now, yeah, right, would you charge him interest? Of course not. He needs the money. You charge him interest, he's going to be no better off. He's just pushing it off, right? So he needs money today, or he's going to lose his house. So you say, that's fine. Okay, I'll lend you money at 10% interest. Right? In 5 years, you're supposed to pay me back the money and give me 10% interest. What's going to happen? He'll be back worse than he was when he borrowed the money. So you don't charge him interest. Why? Because he's your brother. It's one thing if he's a stranger, but he's your brother. You're your brother. How do you do that to your brother? Of course you don't do it. So the Torah is telling us, in this case, Jews are brothers. We're all brothers to each other. We're all relatives. And your relative, you don't take advantage of when they're in trouble. So therefore, you don't charge interest to another Jew, because we're all related. But non-Jews, you have to treat correctly. You have to treat them with dignity. You can't overcharge them. You have to follow the law, but you're allowed to charge them, because there's nothing wrong with charging interest. It's just you wouldn't do it to would you charge your parents interest after what they did for you your whole life? Right? Of course not. So you don't charge other Jews.
How do the banks do in Israel?
There's a legal way that they're able to do it, where you can pay or charge interest. And that was developed because it's basically what happens in Israel, different than here, is when you put money in the bank, what do? They pay you interest, right? What's the interest come from? They take your money and they invest it. So they'll make 10%, you'll get 1%, right? So they make 9% with your money, and that's how the banks work. Right? In Israel, they can't really do that because they're paying you interest. So what in Israel the difference is that if here, let's say the bank took your money, they invested it and they lost it. They made a bad investment. They still owe you the money and they still owe you your interest. One doesn't have anything to do with the other. They're taking your money, they owe you money, and they owe you interest. What now? How are they going to pay you back? That's up to them. If they mess up, too bad. What if they make 20%? Do they pay you twice as much? No. They don't pay you any more if they make, and they don't pay you any less if they lose. Right? But in Israel, with Jews, they have a contract that says, I'm taking your money and I'll pay you interest. It's not interest though. You're investing in this investment, and I'm going to make money on this investment. Let's say I'm going to make 10%. I'm going to give you 2%. That's your payment for your investment. It's not interest. It's your investment. I make 10%. You make 2%. Oh, what if I make 50%? You still get 2%. Why? Because I'm guaranteeing to you that you'll get your 2% no matter what happens. But because I'm giving you that guarantee, you are giving up the right to make more money from me. You can only make this amount. So if I make 80% off your money, you still get 2%. But if I make only 1%, you still get 2%. Because I'm paying the privilege to you of your not being able to make more money in your investment. You can only make this amount. It's like being a silent partner. So therefore, that's how they do it. Right? That's a simple way of understanding it. But in general, we don't charge interest to our family. So therefore, now we read this again. Now it says, when you sell land to your brother, right, to your fellow, meaning another Jew, because it's talking the land of Israel with Jews, you're going to sell him land. I have extra land. You need extra land. I will sell you my land for 30 years. Don't cheat him. It says, why? Because he's your brother. You're not going to cheat your brother. That's crazy. I mean, if one brother cheats another brother, you hear about it for the rest of their life. Why? Because it's immoral. It's sick. A brother would do that, right? Would cheat another brother. It's okay I can understand. It's not okay if I can understand it, but it's a stranger. You cheat a stranger. It's not right, but I can understand it. Cheat your own brother, right? The rest of his life, your brother's going to say, you know what a brother did to me, and everyone's going to say, I can't believe a brother did that, right? But that's because brothers don't do that to each other. So God's saying, you want to sell your land? Fine. You're selling it to a Jew? I'm sorry. You better treat him right. Don't cheat him. Right? And then it tells you the definition of not cheating. And then it comes back and says, you want to sell your land? Okay. Don't cheat your brother. You know why? I'm God. Right? In other words, I'm telling you, this is why you don't cheat your brother. He's your brother. But your brother has a famous father. Me. I'm his father. God says, I'm also your father. You better not do it, because I know. All right? That I might find out. I know what you're doing. I'm the famous father. right? It's one thing if you meet a guy in this, let's say you meet a guy in the street and he needs money, and you'll pay you, charge him 10%, okay, right? And then you find out, and the next day a guy comes up to you, he wants to borrow money, and you lend him money for 10%. Guy comes in and he says, and why 10%? Because you're afraid maybe someone will pay you back, right? So it's 8% from you, but it's 2% as a guarantee against that other guy I lent money to who might not pay me back. So I inflate it so that I don't go out of business. So along comes a guy, and his father is Bill Gates, and Bill Gates says to me, if you lend my son money, I'll make sure that you pay him back. I'll make sure he pays you back. Don't worry about it. So I don't have to charge him 10%. I can charge him less. Because there's no fear. Bill Gates guaranteed it. Right? So in such a case, God's saying, that's me. I'm the most powerful one. You want a father? I'm his father. I'm telling you, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. But don't cheat him, because I'm his father. Right? That's just like Bill Gates. If he finds out that you cheated his son, he'll just get his lawyers to kill you. Right? They'll end up taking all your money. Right? So God's saying, I can do that. Make sure you take care of my kids. You're one of my kids. He's one of my kids. You're brothers. Treat him right. So that's why the Torah says it there. It says that you have to treat him in such a way, because I am God. Because he has a famous father. And then the next line, which is verse 18 on 698 and 699, you shall perform my decrees, observe my ordinances, and perform them. Then you shall dwell securely in the land. So here it's telling us an important point. Anywhere that you are in the land, living in a land, like here in Canada, how do you live securely? There's really two ways. One is you have to have defense. Another country can come and invade you. Another group within the country can come and steal from you. Right? So you have to make laws, and you have to have an army. Right? So you've got, securely can mean that you're not going to be invaded. And so God's saying, you follow the Torah, that's what it's saying, you follow my laws, you won't be invaded. I'll take care of you. But then we notice, if we look ahead, I have to find it as we go through it, but he says it again, where he uses the same expression, that if you follow my Torah, you'll live securely in the land. And the commentaries, I'll ask, why is it twice? Once he says here, and then like about 2 paragraphs later, he says it again. Why is he saying it again? So the commentaries say, is the first one is talking about defense of the land. Right? In other words, so that an invading army doesn't come. You follow my Torah, don't worry that some army is going to come and take over the country. Right? Okay. What's the second one telling you? That one's saying, well, how else do you dwell securely in the land? You have to have a good economy. If you don't have a good economy, you won't be secure either. Secure doesn't necessarily mean secure from enemies. It also means secure in living. Right? So you have to have a good economy. So the next thing I'm promising you is that if you live according to my rules, you'll have a good economy. You'll get by. Maybe you'll be rich, maybe you won't be rich, but you'll get by. You won't starve to death. So that's what he's telling us. That's why it's repeated. And then it goes through a whole bunch of different things about the laws of the Jubilee year, what happens, and how it happens, and so forth. And it's pretty detailed. Who we can sell to, how does it return it. And then at the end, suddenly the topic changes. It goes from the entire parsha talks about these 2 laws: the sabbatical year, the 7th year is the sabbatical year, like Shabbat 7, and the Jubilee year, the 5th year. The whole part, it's all it talks about until you get to the last part, page 706, 707, the last paragraph. You shall not make idols for yourselves. You shall not erect for yourself a statue or a pillar. And in your land you shall not place a flooring stone upon which to prostrate yourself. For I am Hashem your God. My Sabbaths shall you observe, and my sanctuary shall you revere. I am Hashem. Like, what's going on here? Like, what's it talking about? We're talking all about the land, planting, not planting, owning land, not owning land, selling land, buying land. Right? Suddenly it says, don't worship idols. You got to keep Shabbos. Don't go putting some stones on the ground to pray to another god. Right? You should revere my sanctuary. Be afraid of the temple. Right? And, be cautious in the temple. I'm God. What's it doing here? Like it's like God just like stuck in a commercial. And he has a whole long talk about how to, you go to you're going to be a lawyer, so you go to law school and you have a class on torts. That's all this is, like all these things, all these laws, civil laws. And suddenly, in the middle of it, the professor stops and he says, and I'd like to speak to you a minute about Budweiser beer. And then after a minute, he stops and goes back to the talk. That's what God's doing here. He talks all about agriculture, then suddenly he says, hey, listen, don't make idols, right? Don't bow down to idols. Don't put that. So what? And what does it mean when it says don't put a stone on the ground to prostrate yourself? That's why you ever notice on Yom Kippur when we bow down in shul, they always put like a towel down. You think it's because that all of your husbands suddenly became conscious of how they look? It's because you're not supposed to prostrate yourself on a stone. So symbolic of the stone is the floor, right? So we put something between us so we're not laying down on the floor, because then we might be breaking this rule. But it's talking specific. It's very specific here, but we take it larger. It means that's how they used to do it. They used to have special like slabs of stones that they'd put in front of an idol, and you'd bow down in front of it. Maybe you could maybe try to visualize the Arab carries around a carpet with him when he prostrates himself to pray, even though Islam is not idol worship, but nevertheless that concept, right? They carry around the carpet. So imagine if you have a stone. Right, so it says you shouldn't do that, and then it says you should keep Shabbos, and you should be cautious in the temple, right? I am God. So what's going on? So God is telling us after it's all finished, He's basically putting a seal, and He's saying all of these rules: the 7th year, the 50th year, the freeing of your slaves, right? The feeling of security in the land. All of it comes at a price. The price is you got to follow my rules. And this is the basic rules. Number 1, I'm God, not somebody else. Don't go around thinking that there's some other God, right? God, the way the Torah makes it in general is like a wife, right? A man has one wife. That's it. You start fooling around, right? Even no matter what you say, the reason is. I read in the paper now talking about Monica Lewinsky, right? She was interviewed. Right? It makes no difference. She says everything was consensual, but you imagine that it wasn't. Let's say imagine it wasn't. Let's say that that what happened. Bill Clinton, right, is with her. Right? So what does his wife care? He'll say to her, "I don't love her. It was just an opportunity." Right? No different than she's saying, "Bill, you're on a diet," and he eats a candy bar, and she says, "What are you eating a candy bar? You promised me you wouldn't do it." Oh, well, it was only one candy bar, and it was free, and I really liked it. So she's not going to divorce him. So why would she divorce him because he had an affair with a woman? He doesn't even care for her. He doesn't have any feelings for her. He's not going to support her, right? His wife he loves. His wife he cares for. His wife he supports. Why does she care so much if he did this? You think about it. I know it sounds ridiculous because I'm speaking to women, because they think because that's what happens. And the answer is just that. Because it's part of who we are. It's who you are. You can't go and say, I believe in God, but you know what, I can make a couple of bucks if I go to church. So I'm going to go to church, make a couple of bucks, but I still believe in God. God's saying, no. You got one wife, and you got one God. I don't care what ulterior reason you say, that you think that it might be good for you, you might make a better living, you might be easier for you, you don't mean it, there was no feelings, I was drunk, whatever you want to say when it comes to an affair, you say it when you worship idols, it don't count. You're up the creek. You're going to have no security in the land. You're going to get thrown out of the land. I'm not going to let you stay here. This is the rule. And not only is it with idol worship, because what is idol worship really? It's a denial of God, right? In other words, you're not God, this is God. That's what it's saying. So it's a denial of God. So that's rule number 1. What's Shabbos? Shabbos is a mitzvah that tells us that God cares. He cares. In other words, He's telling you, you got to do this. Why does God want us to do mitzvahs? Like, what's the purpose? Ever wonder about that? We have all these mitzvahs to do. What does God care? We know He doesn't need us to do them. Right? He doesn't need it, right? God created us, so like it's like you have children just so they should honor you. That's why you have children? Nope, I don't know anybody like that. I had, you know what? I decided my wife and I are so much in love we're going to have a kid. Why? Because I want him to stand up when I walk in the room. That's why. Well, that's ridiculous. Nobody says that. So why does God give us mitzvahs to do? It's not because He wants us to just to do what He says, because it's good for us. Mitzvahs are like medicine. God, just like when you have a kid and the kid needs to take medicine, he doesn't want to take medicine, right? So you got to trick him, right, to take medicine. So God's saying to us, I want to do good for you. I want to give you everything. But I know if I give you everything, you're going to get spoiled. And you won't appreciate it. So I want you to feel like I owe it to you. Right? It's like you do with your kids with allowance. You say, all right, I'm going to give you $10 a week. You got to take out the garbage. First thing, it's not worth it to pay $10 a week for garbage, right? But nevertheless, why do you do it? Because if you give your kid $10 a week, they'll take it, but they don't feel, they lose their self-esteem. They feel they owe you. They're not worth it. They can't make their own money. They have to be given gifts. Now, if they're 10 years old, that's normal. But if they're 20 years old, they're a married man, and we have people like this, right? They have no self-respect. They lose their self-respect. So what you do is you make up things. You tell a 15-year-old kid, well, you want $10 a week, you got to take the garbage out. All right? And then by virtue of the fact he takes the garbage out, he comes to you and says, you owe me. Right? I earned it. So he has dignity. He has independence. You've taught him something. So God does that with us. He says, I want you to keep a mitzvah. You got to put on tefillin every day. You put on tefillin every day, I'm going to give you a reward. Does God need us to put on tefillin? Nope. Does it make his life any better? No. Any worse? No. Why? Because it's for us. It's our medicine. It's to give us self-esteem. It's to give us something so we can go back to God and say, you owe me. You promised me a reward. You owe me. I did what you said. Right? And that's what He wants. He wants us to have that dignity, that independence, to be able to do something. And because I did it, now I deserve it. Before I didn't deserve it. Because if God gives us a life that's all good and we don't deserve it, right, we're just going to rebel against Him. I don't need you. My life's great. What do I need you for? So that's the idea. So Shabbos is the symbol of that. Because Shabbos says that God created the world in 6 days, and the seventh day He rested. You have to do that too. On 6 days you got to work. Seventh day, everything's perfect. It's not perfect, you better act like it's perfect, because you're not fixing it. You're not changing it. This is how it is. Right? Why? Because I said so. And God cares. So by you keeping Shabbos, you're acknowledging that God created the world and He cares. So that's why it's the second thing here. Because the first one is there is a God. The second one is that God cares. Because there's a lot of people who say, sure, God created the world. Sure, God created us. And then He goes away and He watches us bump into each other. Right? Because it's like a comedy routine. Right? No. God is involved. Right? That's what Shabbos says. And then it says that, and my sanctuary you should revere. The temple, you have to have respect for the temple. Right? There it's telling us that the fact that we have to have respect for what we call God's home, right, is showing us that there's a thing called human dignity. That the way I act, the way I am, represents God in this world. If I go into a sanctuary and I talk and I fool around and I do things I shouldn't do inside of God's house, right? Anywhere in the world is God's house, but if I actually go into God's house and do it, right? It's an insult, right? It's one thing if someone tells somebody, let's say somebody goes, I'm a baker, right? And you go to a different bakery. All right, what am I going to do? Not everybody likes my baking. Maybe I think I'm the best, but still, people are funny. They'll go to the other bakery. But I invite you to my house for Shabbos. You bring me a cake from a different bakery? That you wouldn't do. Right? That's an insult. That's what it means when you go into God's house and you act wrong. God sees you wherever you are, right? But you come into my house, I invite you into my house and I'm going to give you a meal, and you're going to bring a competitor's cake? Bring me flowers, dummy. Don't bring me a cake. You're insulting me. You're telling me I'm coming to your house and I'm looking so much forward to it. I want to give you a special gift. I'm going to find the best cake in the city and give it to you, and it's somebody else's. You're insulting me. That's what God's saying. So we have to recognize the first thing that it tells us. You have to recognize who God is and nobody else. And then you have to realize that God cares. And the third thing is that God is saying that you represent me. You are my representative in this world. Everything you do has a reflection on me. So you go into the temple, act right. right? So that's when I invite you to my house. You don't bring me a cake someone else made. But God's saying it's beyond that. As long as you're in this world, I'm everywhere. So I want you to make sure you understand that you have to act with dignity. And that's why we have this whole concept in Judaism of the importance of human dignity. Like, for instance, I don't want to get graphic, but it's the only thing that comes to mind is that there are times in Jewish law that things you can't do that cause you embarrassment. Like, for instance, you're not supposed to tear on Shabbos, right? Tear paper. So when I go into a washroom, you're supposed to have there paper that's already torn. So what if you're walking home and you have to go to the washroom? Like, what are you going to do? Out of human dignity, you should go to the washroom. You shouldn't hold it in. It's not right. So you're not home. So you go to the library, and you're walking home. You go to the library. The library doesn't have torn paper on Shabbos. So what do? You're going to be dirty. You're going to smell. You're going to feel bad, right? So the law says, out of human dignity, you're allowed to tear it. Even though normally you can't tear paper on Shabbos, because of human dignity, you're allowed to tear paper on Shabbos for that purpose. Because you shouldn't walk around feeling dirty, smelling, or thinking you smell, right? Because dignity takes precedence. So that's saying, act with dignity, right? Don't just act with dignity at my price, right? Tearing toilet paper on Shabbos. Act with dignity all the time. That's why I find it so important how we dress, how we act, that we don't show extreme emotions in public. I mean, it's one thing to, if I speak to do something, but I mean in general, if I'm upset, I don't get upset in public. If someone does something wrong, I don't reprimand them in public. Like, all the time, I'll kid with people. Like, if I'm friendly with you, like, sometimes I'll make a joke, but it's an insult, but it's a joke, right? And it's apparent, right, that it's a joke. It doesn't, I'll say, like, as a baker, you're a great farmer, right? Something it's insulting, but it's a joke. It's meant because I like you. So if I do that, so sometimes a person will get upset, they'll get bothered, because they think the rabbi doesn't talk like that. The rabbi, is the rabbi. So I'd say, listen, if I really was reprimanding you, if I really thought you were doing something wrong, would I do it in front of everybody? Right? After all the years you've known me, have I ever done such a thing? No. So I'm just making a joke. Right? So I have to learn. Sometimes maybe they're not such good jokes, so I got to cut it out. Mm-hmm. But that's what it is, right? I'm making we all do it. We all have it, right? That we make a joke, and we're making a joke, and it's at somebody's expense. And if they don't realize you're making a joke, they'll get insulted, right? And they have to think it through, right? And then they'll realize it. But that's it. And God is saying you have to act with dignity. So you can't hurt other people, and you can't walk around like a schlepper. You have to, my Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Ruderman, when I was in Yeshiva, he was an old man. I mean, he was like pre-war, right? So this was in the 70s. And he was already, I don't know, in fact, I don't know how old he was, because probably anybody over 30 was old to me then. But he was an old man. And he dressed with, impeccably. He was like a prince. And he was almost totally blind. He couldn't see. So he had a rule that for any of the students who were close with him, if they ever saw a smudge, dirt, something on his coat, he would not necessarily see it. They should tell him, and he kept an extra outfit in his office, and he would change. You got a guy, I don't know, in the 70s, in his 80s. I have no idea how old he was, but he wasn't 30. He was an old man. He came to America before World War II, right? So, but it was so important to him that this is not because he was vain, is because that's how you do it. If you represent God in this world, you dress correctly.